when I was a little kid, I was really, really, really afraid of the dark. Can anyone relate with what I'm talking about? Anyone have a fear of the dark when you were a little kid? I mean, I was so afraid of the dark that, and we lived down in Phoenix, Arizona, which was warm all the time, so our garage doors open all day long. And our garage, we had a kind of a weird house because our garage didn't have an entrance into the house from the garage. Like you had to walk outside the garage and around the sidewalk to the front door. So at night, every single night, somebody had the job of shutting the garage door. But so I just remember, I have these memories as a kid, standing at the front door and looking outside and just standing there and knowing that I had to run down the sidewalk, around the corner, grab the string, pull the garage door down, and run back inside before something ate me alive, right? I mean, I'm not joking. Like sometimes I would make the run. I'd jump up in the air because I was a little bit too short to hit the string just by standing. So I'd have to jump up and grab the handle, and I'd miss. So I'd run back inside. Like I wouldn't take a second jump. I would just run back in the house and like, okay, we're gonna have to take another circle at this, okay? I can't stand out here this long because something may happen to me, And we were so irrational, right? Like if I would have ever thought it through, like, really, is something gonna eat me? Is something going to attack me? I never took time to think that stuff through. This is what a mindset is. A mindset is something that actually controls the way you behave. It controls how you act, right? Now, there's a couple of really critical things that we have to know about mindset. One, they're not always true or right. In fact, many times you can have a mindset that's completely rooted in something that's not reality. But another thing that's really important to understand about mindset is they can change. Our mindset can change, and many times can change for the better. So you can see how that fear mindset in me as a kid, it controlled me. I mean, I was paralyzed sometimes standing at that front door, wondering if I could actually force myself to go out and shut the door, right? Well, let me give you another example, because I met this girl when she was in high school a number of years ago. She was involved in the youth ministry at my parish. And I met this girl just a couple months after the Columbine shooting. And she was very timid, very shy. She really struggled socially. And she came with one of her friends that night. And I remember actually meeting her the first time and being kind of struck by, wow, that girl can't even talk. She's so shy, And got to know her more and more. She kept coming. There's something that she really liked about being around our parish. And so she kept coming. And the assistant youth minister and I, her name was Kate, the two of us really kind of took this girl under our wings because she kept coming around more and more. But as I got to know her, like she would make these comments about herself, like, I'm junk. I'm no good. The Columbine shooting racked this girl's life. I mean, it really had a huge impact on her. And the reason why we found out over time was because the day the shooting happened, she was going into the library to study. She was literally standing in the doorway. And a couple of her friends come up and grab her and say, no, go to lunch with us. And she's like, no, I need to study. No, you need to go to lunch with us. And they arguing back and forth. And they literally, I mean, the way she would describe it is like they forced her to go to lunch with them. They grab her by the arm and they take her out of the building. And 10 minutes later, the shooting happens and everyone who was in the library got killed. So here's a girl who's locked into a mindset, I'm no good, I'm junk. And she's thinking, I should be dead. Maybe if I was in that library, somebody else who was in there wouldn't be dead. Because that's actually what I deserve. That was her mindset. I mean, think about how jacked up that is. Mindsets aren't always real. They aren't always rooted in what's true. And sometimes they can cause us lots of problems. I remember many, many times talking to her, and the big question that she struggled with, that she kept wrestling with, was, why me? Why am I still alive? And why are these other people dead? So think about this with me. If a mindset is a way of thinking that controls our behavior, that affects what we do, right? Do you understand why mindset is so critical to discipleship? You can't be a disciple if you don't act, if you don't go do something. I mean, to be a disciple, to be called to be a disciple, it demands action. It demands a response from us. Well, if your mindset as a disciple isn't right, you can't actually do what you're supposed to do. So mindset is critical to discipleship. Now, this isn't like self-help theory or something, right? Like there's all kinds of examples of mindset. You could look at athletes, you could look at businessmen and businesswomen, or professional musicians or artists. Like they have a mindset. They set their mind to something bigger than themselves, and they go do it, right? And they're incredibly successful, right? So look at here's some of my new extreme sports. This is plain water skiing. Awesome. Well, look at this. If you think that's cool, look at this. This is my new race that I'm trying, dolphin racing. Okay? Is this what we're talking about? We talk about mindset? Are we talking about, having some self-help book that you read that gets you really fired up about who you are and like how great you are, and now you're going to go out and do something awesome? No. That's actually not what I'm talking about. Having a mindset that's rooted in truth. That's what a mindset of a disciple is. So I want to look for us today at how could we understand the critical nature of a mindset? Well, I'm wondering if you've ever heard the scripture passage. Have any of you ever heard the passage that talks about, a man wouldn't build a tower without first trying to figure out what all he needs to build the tower, because if he didn't, he'd start building and then he wouldn't be able to finish and everyone would be making fun of him. Anyone ever hear this story? And it says, or then a king wouldn't go to war against somebody else unless he went and did a scout and found out how many soldiers they had. I mean, this passage, look at this with me. This is from Luke chapter 14. It says, which of you desiring to build a tower doesn't first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and then he's not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying this, he began to build and wasn't able to do it. Or the next passage is, or what king going to encounter another king in war wouldn't sit down first and count up how many soldiers he had and count up how many soldiers the other guy had and try to make an assessment like, am I actually going to be able to defeat him? I mean, if he has 20,000 soldiers and I only have 10,000 soldiers, I may want to go try to see if I can send an emissary out there to see if we can make peace, because I'm going to get slaughtered, right? See, this is counting the cost. How many of you have ever heard this passage before? You heard this story, okay? A lot of us have heard it before. Like, this is one of the gospel readings that we read in the lectionary schedule. But one of the things that you may not have remembered is that those two analogies are surrounded by two verses that talk about what it means to be a disciple. Verse 27 says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And then he goes on to that analogy. What man would build a tower? What king would go to war? And then look how it ends in verse 33. Whoever does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. So, counting the cost. Like this really is why mindset is so critical to discipleship. Because you got to know what you're getting yourself into. I mean, really, for some of you, I mean, is discipleship something that you're doing or you're choosing right now in your life because it's just something your parents expect from you? I mean, is it something that you've weighed out the cost? You've measured this and you've looked at it and you said, this is what I need to do with my life. So what does this have to do with discipleship? So we understand what mindset is. It's a way of thinking that actually controls our behavior, right? Why is it so important? Well, because it does control our behavior. If we want to be disciples, we've got to act. We've got to do stuff for God in response to him. So let's try to define it. What's the mindset of a disciple? How would you give some definition to it? Well, I want to give you something very, very simple. A mindset can be defined by the scripture passage. This line in the gospel, which is actually Jesus talking to his disciples, in one sentence, he just nails it. Look at this. Then Jesus told his disciples, if any man would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Wow, check this out. We've got like a 3-point plan for the mindset of a disciple right here. Really, really simple. Number 1. Oh, back up. How do I back up? Deny yourself. If you want to be my disciple, you must deny yourself. Denying ourselves is denying our preferences. Denying, sometimes choosing not between a bad and a good, but choosing between a good and a greater good. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing to watch a television show. But if you could sometimes choose between watching a television show and reading the Bible, that's a greater good because you're pursuing that relationship with God. To be a disciple sometimes means denying yourself and making those kinds of decisions. Eating food isn't a bad thing. We actually need to eat food to survive, right? But sometimes as a disciple, denying myself eating food and fasting for world hunger, or fasting for the cause of life, or fasting for some friend who's really struggling. Like when I choose to deny myself and embrace that kind of activity, right? When I freely choose it, it actually starts putting me in conformity with what Jesus did. And this is why he's saying this is the 3-point plan of a discipleship mindset. First, deny yourself. So how can you begin to find ways that you can deny yourself, deny your own preferences in your life? What's the second thing? Take up your cross. You see, this is where it comes down to that embrace the pain concept. This is the shepherd talking to much afraid. That girl that I met, she was so locked up into her own mindset about herself that I'm no good and I don't have any self-worth and I don't have any value, that she could never get beyond that, to actually embrace the pain of confronting those things. Why do I think like that about myself? I mean, that's going to be painful to go there, but you've got to embrace, that's part of taking up the cross. You know, part of taking up the cross for us as disciples means that we are willing to sacrifice everything. Most of us think sometimes like the big sacrifice, the big cross of following Christ is the big things. You know, like I'm going to stand up in front of somebody and be a martyr and die. Well, that's great. But you got to do all the little things before you ever get there. Like forgive my parents. You can't be a disciple and hold on to all kinds of resentment and bitterness. You can't blame your parents for where you're at in your life. At a certain point, these are your choices. You've got to make choices about how you're going to take up your cross, how you're going to deny yourself, how you're going to be a disciple and respond to that invitation that Jesus has to you. To be a disciple means to renounce everything. Everything. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and finally follow Jesus. And this isn't just following him where he went to the cross, but it's actually following him in everything else. Like, it's like our lives actually begin to become patterned after him. We start to act like him, think like him, react like him, respond like him, treat other people like he would treat other people. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing? I mean, just think about this for a second. Wouldn't it be amazing if somebody would see you acting and would think that you were Jesus? Wow, that person is so charitable. They're so loving. They're so generous. You ever met somebody in your life like that? I have. I've met people that their lives, when they follow Jesus, they followed him so closely that they actually started looking like him. They started to become like him. And that ultimately is the invitation for us as disciples. Well, I want to end by giving us a little bit of a lens. I'm going to call it the hurricane lens. You guys all know our new Holy Father, Pope Francis. He was just down in Rio for World Youth Day, right? And I wasn't able to go, but I spent a lot of time following him while he was down there, reading his addresses and talks and the different masses and all the things that he did. I spent a lot of time trying to look at what he was saying. And I actually came out of there with several things. I mean, first, it seemed like an amazing experience following the news of it. Like, the reason why I'm calling it the hurricane lens is because that's what people started calling him. Hurricane Francis. Like, they were saying that he hit that country like a hurricane. No one was expecting what happened. Stuff was going on before him everywhere he went. You know, he was constantly outside the box, outside his security detail, and messing everything up. Like, people had plans for stuff, and he was messing up their plans. You know? That's what I love about him. Like, he's so unpredictable, right? Well, over the course of World Youth Day, there are several things that he said. I mean, look at this. Look at that crowd. 3.7 million people. It's one of the largest World Youth Day events in history. Second only, I think, to the Philippines. Yet in a crowd of 3.7 million people, without the person on the other side of the wall knowing, he snuck into a confessional and for hours just heard confessions. Can you imagine? I mean, those people don't know that it's him on the other side. He snuck into a confessional to hear. Could you imagine being in a confessional and you're actually talking to the Pope? That would be crazy. It's insane. It's like a grandpa. Look at that face. Don't you want to just walk up and pinch the cheeks? It's just cute. But here's kind of his lens. He kind of gave 3 key words that I just kept hearing him say over and over and over again in the time that he was there. Go. So notice, first of all, that Pope Francis, he has that mindset of a disciple. He's denying himself. He's taking up his cross. He's following Jesus. But the message that he gave to young people of the world, the message that he's given to you is go. Go out into the world. Go to the furthest corners of the world. And you know what? The best place to start is your world. Go to the furthest corners of your world. Who are the people in your life that you avoid? Maybe even in your own family. Do you have siblings that you avoid? Siblings that you try not to really rub shoulders with and stay as far away from as you can? I mean, start in the small places and you can build from there, right? Go. Go to the people in your world, in your life, with who you are as a disciple. Go to the people that you normally wouldn't associate with. Go to the people that you might avoid. This is what he was saying. Go. Go out into the world. How many times would you choose maybe, sometimes like even in your schools, you go to eat lunch, and you go and sit at a certain table, and there might be a kid sitting over completely by themselves. Have you ever thought of just getting out of the box and going and sitting by the kid who's alone? Go. Go into the world, into your world. Secondly, don't be afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid of going to those far places and into those places that you normally wouldn't. Go to those people that you maybe wouldn't normally associate with. So that's part of what he means with don't be afraid. But he was very specific. When he kept saying don't be afraid, you know what he was talking about? Don't be afraid to get in trouble. Don't be afraid if things get messy. Don't be afraid if you get in over your head. Don't be afraid to get into a situation where you start talking to somebody, you don't know what I'm going to say. You ever done that? You start talking to somebody about your faith and you're like, oh, I don't know what to say. What am I going to say? I mean, that's what the Pope was saying. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get in conversations. Don't try to plan it all out. Don't try to make it all clean. Don't be afraid for things to get messy, because it's going to get messy. It's going to be clunky. It's not going to work well. You're probably going to look like an idiot. It's okay, because Jesus is calling you to go. And if he's calling you to go, then he's going to equip you. He's going to tell you what to say. He's going to show you what to do. Don't be afraid. And finally, serve. Serve others. Look for ways that you can serve. Look for people who are less fortunate than you. Look for people who need your help. Look for ways that you can stretch yourself to help care for the needs of others. Serve. Go, don't be afraid, serve. That's the World Youth Day hurricane lens for the mindset of a disciple, which is what we're talking about today. You know, I want to wrap up by just completing the story about this young girl I met when she was in high school. She made her first vows as a religious sister in a religious order. All those years ago, I should have been dead. Why me? Why am I alive? Much afraid. This girl is beaming. I mean, when I met her, she was this timid, shy girl. You can't even get her to talk. I can't get her to stop talking now. I mean, I was with her all day Saturday, just talk. She's just beaming and smiling, and there's stuff just pouring out of her. It's like, who the heck are you? You're so different than, you know what? You're not much afraid anymore. You're up on the high places. You're jumping around. You're who you were meant to be. Why did God save her life that day? Because of this. God had a much bigger plan. Her mindset was locked in fear. Her mindset was locked in all this low self-worth and no value in herself. She couldn't see any of that. But her mindset got changed. And look who she's become. Look who God helped her become. Wow. Wow. I cried all day. I just cried all day watching it unfold in front of me. It's beautiful. Her name is Sister Mary Gianna. And you know what's ironic? Guess what the name of the order is? Disciples of our Lord Jesus. She went from the mindset of a broken, hurting, shy, timid girl, afraid to even move. And she's become someone who is jumping, leaping up on the high places as she has followed Jesus to become his disciple.